I said, "Oh, when's the press conference tomorrow morning with Golden State?" And they said, "Oh, 10 o'clock." I said, "Great." So my cameraman and I got there at 10 o'clock, and the press conference is over. And the guy that did this to me, he's sitting courtside with his hands like this. He goes, "Oh, are we a little late for the press conference?" And I thought my cameraman was going to hit him.
She's a sportscaster, writer, teacher, and foster mom. She's worked with big names like ESPN and the Phoenix Suns. She has written multiple books. Please welcome Anne Montgomery to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to have you on, talk about, your career, sports, and a ton of other topics about you, your career, your life. Um, First sort of question just to get into it. What sort of sparked your interest for sports? What made you want to get into the sports world, sports journalism, all that?
I grew up in an ice rink. When I was 5 years old, my parents took me ice skating. And of course, as a little kid, I had these big dreams of being an Olympic gold medalist in ice skating. I was not talented in the least. I did become an ice dancer. But so that was the sport. But I also shared ice time with hockey players. So I grew up around hockey players and I loved hockey. When I got to high school, I joined the broadcast crew, and this was a group that did announcements every morning. And one
Yeah.
day I grabbed all the sports announcements, and they said, "You can't have those. You're a girl." And I said, "Well, why not? I want to read the sports." And the teacher, who was the head of the department, said she can read the sports if she wants to. And the guys were upset about that, so much so that they started calling me Big Ann. And anytime I went on the air, they would run the theme song from Mission Impossible. And by the time I graduated from high school, I said, my mother stood in front of me. She said, "We have to take you to college. I need to know what you want to do for a living." I said, "I want to be a sportscaster." And she looked at me and she said, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm trying to have a serious conversation with you." And nobody believed. I mean, it was the 70s. There weren't women
Yeah.
sportscasters. Didn't occur to me at the time that was problematic. And went to college. My professors all said, "You'll never be a sportscaster." And I know while I was at school, I did work the local PBS station that was tied in with my university, and the basketball coach, the baseball coach, and the football coach all refused to be interviewed by me. But I learned
Hmm.
something. There were a lot of other sports on campus. There were hockey teams and soccer teams and wrestling teams and gymnastics teams, and none of them ever got any attention because the three big sports did. They loved when I came to interview them. So I got to do it simply because there were so many ignored teams. Um, but of course, it was still in the 70s. And so it took me quite a while to get at that first job in broadcasting.
Yeah, and so, facing that sort of adversity, that backlash of being a female in sports in general, but especially, sports casting, something where a lot of people hadn't really seen or heard of a woman in that. What was that like to sort of, I guess, I don't know if you knew any women in sports, but what was that to
No,
sort of be the first or one of the
I
first in sports?
I didn't know any, and to be honest, I couldn't even get a job interview. Nobody would talk to me, and I ended up working in a bar in Georgetown in Washington, DC, and just, like, out of the blue one night, my aunt, who was, like, closer to my age than really to my mother's, she said, "Let's go see the Washington Capitals play," and I said, "Great." And we got there, and her friend went with us, and it turns out he was an amateur hockey official, and he was bemoaning the fact that there weren't enough officials, just like today, there aren't enough officials. And my
Mm.
aunt said, "Oh, Annie can skate. She can be a referee." And I went, "All right, I'll go be a referee." Now, I was never on hockey skates in my life until the moment of my first game. I grew up on figure skates, so of course I could
Yeah.
skate. But hockey skates, as you may know, are very different from figure skates. The one main thing they don't have is toe picks. So
Yeah.
when went out to do my first hockey game, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and it was little tiny kids, with the sawed off sticks and the jerseys to their ankles. I fell down 3 times taking that first face off, and I couldn't get back up because I was a lazy skater. I would just dig my toe pick in and pop back up usually. So I fell down, and these little tiny kids are staring down at me on the ice. It was a mess, but
Yeah.
on the way home, I had an epiphany. I realized that because I grew up before Title IX, that I didn't get to play any of the sports that I'd have to cover. And so I didn't know enough about them. And maybe if I became an official in the five main team spectator sports, football, baseball, ice hockey, soccer, and basketball, and I did that for 5 years, maybe some forward thinking news director would give me a job. And that's exactly what happened. Um, but I was 28 years old by then, so it took me a long time to get that job. But the
Yeah.
weird thing is that I never quit officiating. If you had told me that I would end up officiating for 40 years, I would tell you you were out of your mind because officiating is a different kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever tried it. Have you?
I have not. No,
Ah, you're a sports
I've
fan.
like seen flyers and opportunities for it, but I haven't actually gotten into it.
Yeah, well, I kept doing it. I finally retired from football in 2019. I did football for 40 years. I did baseball for 25. I was terrible at soccer and basketball, so I quit them pretty early on. But the bottom line is, I got that first job in Columbus, Georgia, which is a little tiny TV market, because they thought I might know something. And let's face it, who knows more about the games than the officials? Think about
Yeah.
it. How
Yeah.
many players and coaches and fans read rule books? I don't think people understand how much training we go through. When I was still doing football, we started in July. We had, 2 nights a week. We had classes. We watched film. Went to clinics. We had to take a national test, an exam every year. I don't think people understand how much time we put in that we don't get paid for. So I
Yeah.
know that wasn't exactly the question you asked me, but the bottom line is I did end up, because of all my officiating years, that I then ended up working for 5 TV stations, including, as you pointed out, ESPN. Um, so yeah, I did end up getting to do
Yeah.
it. The problem is that 10 years later, I'm pushing 40 and I'm not pretty enough to be in front of a camera anymore. So, but that's okay. 10 years was
Yeah.
enough of that. And then I
Yeah.
went into print reporting. So I covered sports and I ended up covering a lot of other things too. So I ended up in print reporting for about 5 years.
And coming into sports, that whole industry, that whole world before Title IX, like you said, what was sort of your reaction or what went through your head once you saw that come into place and you sort of saw that this would probably be a way for other women to get into the sports world?
It's only been relatively recently that there have been a lot of women. My concern is that they're not giving them the top jobs or even remotely. I mean, let's face it, they invented sideline reporting so they could say they hired women. And a sideline reporter is the most thankless, useless job in sportscasting. Because do you want to stick a microphone in the face of a coach who's down by 50 points at halftime? It's a terrible gig. And I don't
Yeah.
understand why we can't have some women in the booth. Why we can't have, women. The bottom line is you could take a nurse and put a nurse on the sideline with a microphone because 9 times out of 10, what are they talking about? Oh, we think he pulled a hamstring, Bob. So it's might as well put
Yeah.
a nurse down there. They rarely ask insightful questions because they don't have much time. So while there are more women in sports, two reasons: they're trying to look better, they're trying to look like they're being inclusive, but secondly, there are a lot more outlets today. When I started, there were 3 TV stations in every town, so that meant there were 6 sportscasters, that was it. So now
Yeah.
there are a lot more opportunities simply because there are a lot more outlets.
Yeah. And now, sort of the same thing. We're seeing a lot of now like women's sports leagues come up, like the WNBA, women's
Yes.
soccer, all these things, and you see that it's sort of the same thing. They're getting the jobs, they're getting that opportunity, but it's not to the same level as other leagues, as other men's professional sports.
Yeah,
And
but the good thing, and I'll go back to Title IX, is that when I was in school, a very small percentage of girls played sports. Now it's almost, what, 45 to 50% of high school girls play sports. That's a
yeah,
beautiful thing. And you know what? It's got nothing to do with becoming a pro or getting endorsements. It has to do with being well-rounded for employment. Because if you look at the women who are in C-suite, running big corporations, 90% of them played sports. Now, what does that tell you? What do we learn when we play sports? It's not, and it doesn't even matter if you're on a winning team. It doesn't matter if you're the third
Yeah.
string. It matters that you get there on time, that you work as part of a team, that you learn how to take direction, that you learn how to follow rules. These are brilliant skills for being in business. So that's why Title IX was so important. It wasn't necessarily because women were going to play pro sports or be Olympic gold medalists.
Yeah.
It's that it was giving them a leg up on the business world. So I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah. And so just going back a little bit, you were saying that you sort of started off with hockey, and the big sports, but you said that you didn't really have, or you weren't, uh I forget what you said. You were like, you didn't have the most knowledge for basketball, was that it? Or you
No,
didn't?
I was a terrible basketball official. And they say if you can officiate one sport, you can officiate all sports because it's a mindset. But I hated basketball, and it's ironic because I ended up working with the Phoenix Suns for
Well,
2
yeah,
years,
that's what I wanted to get
and
into
that was
eventually.
fun. That
Eventually,
was
you had a job for a little bit with the Phoenix Suns, so,
right,
like,
but I
how
didn't
did
have
that
to
evolve? How did you
officiate.
go from not really liking officiating to working for years with the Phoenix Suns?
Well, the bottom line is when you're a sportscaster at the local level, you have to cover all sports. I don't
Yeah,
know that there's a sport I haven't covered. So there's a difference between asking questions and putting pieces together and anchoring the news than there is in officiating. And I just knew basketball was too gray for me. Was it a charge? I don't know. I
yeah,
was bad. And soccer was horrible. That was way too much running around, and often I would be the only referee on the field, which was lonely. I like having to work with partners. I like having a crew of officials. So
yeah,
I knew I wasn't very good, but I promised myself that I would become certified in those 5 sports, and I did. I did. I kept up with football and baseball. I would have with hockey, but I ended up in Phoenix, and back then there wasn't any hockey here. So and then when I had a chance to go back, I was into a new career because I became a teacher. So I just stuck with football and baseball after that.
yeah, yeah, and so, you know, anyone, not only necessarily women, but anyone trying to get into the sports media, sports journalism world, what sort of tips or advice would you give to them if they want to try to start working towards a career in it?
The most important thing, and my students never believe me when I tell them this, is writing. Are you a good writer? Can you tell a story? Because guess what? We write everything down. Almost nobody's ad libbing. Okay, if you're doing play by play or something like that, yes, of course they've got copious notes in front of them and they're ad libbing. But if you're a sports anchor or you're a reporter, you are writing stories. And you have to tell those stories concisely and in a clever way. And so if you're not a good writer, the rest of it doesn't matter. Because I'll tell you honestly, when I got hired at ESPN to anchor Sports Center, I asked my boss, I said, "Why did you hire me?" And he said, "Because you're a really good writer." And no one had ever said that to me before. I'm dyslexic. I didn't read when I was a
Mhm.
kid. I ended up being a good student because I worked really hard to get around that. So the thought that I ended up being a good writer was astonishing to me. But I would say be a good writer. And you also have to be able to communicate in person. And many young people who've grown up looking at screens are not very good at that. You know,
Yeah,
so so it's the idea that you have to be able to write a story, and you need all those solid communication skills. You need to be able to interview people and have good questions, and you need to be interested. You need to really care about what you're going to produce. And it's hard, pushing out
yeah,
packages and anchoring news every day is very stressful and difficult. So I would say work on writing skills. The voice skills are not that important anymore. You don't have to have a great voice to be on television anymore. They're getting away from that. Maybe that's a good thing. You don't have to have the built-in golden pipes. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
But no, I would say be a good writer and be personable. Be somebody who people can talk to. Look people in the eye. Shake their hands. Be able to communicate in person.
yeah. And I guess you sort of mentioned it that you sort of had this first boss tell you that your writing was good, and that's sort of what you now have as your most important advice or knowledge in your career. Did that sort of spark something in you to that, hey, maybe writing like this sports world is really the right thing for me? Did that sort of confirm it for you that this is what you were meant to be doing?
Well, it's ironic. I didn't at first, and then certainly when I was no longer, I worked for 5 TV stations locally and nationally, and then suddenly I'm pushing 40, and no one will hire me anymore. And that was a hard thing for me to deal with. I mean, I thought it only matters what I look like. I refuse to get plastic surgery. I just won't do it. And the attitude is, well, the average sports viewer is an 18 to 34-year-old male, and if you're 40, they're not looking at you anymore. Well, that's kind of disappointing. I thought
Yeah.
I'm a good writer. Why can't I be on TV anymore? In retrospect, they did me a favor. They really did. But when I left television, I then went into print. And it was very funny because I desperately needed a job, came back to Phoenix, nobody would hire me anywhere. And I went back to officiating like Little League and Pop Warner. I mean, my ego was pretty bruised, I'll admit. And I saw an ad for a sports reporter for a small local newspaper. And I went over there and they said, "Oh, but you don't know how to write." I said, "I've been writing for 10 years for TV." I said, "Everything I said, I wrote." And they said, "Oh, we'll give you a chance." It was a $7 an hour gig.
Hmm.
And they made it seem like, oh, they just felt sorry for me. And then my stories kept ending up on the front page. And they went, "Oh, you're pretty good at this." And then I worked for several other newspapers and I wrote for 3 magazines. And moving
Yeah.
into novel writing, it's just TV writing is short,
Yeah.
succinct,
Yeah.
writing for newspaper and magazines, you got a lot more space, a lot more words. And the next step to a novel just seemed normal to me. So yeah, it's ironic. In fact, my best friend from high school, who always had her nose buried in a book and I never read, when she found out I was an author, she goes, "How the hell did you ever become an author?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know."
And with all these novels you've written, were they did you sort of start focusing on them and have those as your main projects, or did you continue other jobs, other things while writing those? Are you a music artist trying to find a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible? Then check out DistroKid. DistroKid is a super user-friendly and super easy-to-use service that will make your music available in stores like Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, Amazon Music, YouTube, Snapchat, everything. Everything you could imagine, it's available. People will even be able to add your songs into their Instagram stories. DistroKid helps you with the distribution, monetization, and promotion of all of your music. Use the link in the description of this video for 7% off any DistroKid package you want. Pick from musician packages designed to help artists get their own music out there, or even get a label package where you can manage up to 100 artists from one profile. So that's more for like managers, labels, and you can also get the musician package that I mentioned earlier, which is more for artists, producers, things like that. It's super easy, and you can get 7% off any package right now with the link in the description of this video. So once again, if you're looking for a way to get your music on as many streaming platforms as possible, I'm talking any platform you can think of, get DistroKid and get 7% off right now with the link in the description. Back to the program.
I when I after I'd been writing, I mean, I needed a full-time job. I didn't have one. I was doing piecemeal work basically, and I was doing private video production, and that wasn't an everyday gig. So people kept telling me I should be a teacher, and I'm like, no way, don't want to be a teacher. They said, but you spent your whole life working around kids because of officiating. And so I decided to go back to college and get my teaching cert. I got hired to be part of a communications magnet. We had a TV station, a radio station, and a newspaper. And but inner city school, Title One, which meant 70% of our kids lived in poverty. And I ended up being a teacher there for 20 years. And so my book writing I did in the summer. So
Yeah.
I spent most of my time teaching, and then I would write when I had time off.
So,
But now
you
I'm
know,
retired, so I write all the time.
and teaching being something you were sort of unsure of, was there any moment for you that sort of solidified that teaching was something you could do, something that, you know.
There were there were more moments that made me think teaching was not for me. My very, I came from the
What
business
yeah,
world. I came from newsrooms where everybody's running around trying to get their work done. And so I went in and I treated my kids who ran the TV station there like we were in a newsroom. They didn't like that because I expected them to be on time. I expected them to get their work done on deadlines. I expected them
yeah,
to be properly dressed for their programs. And one day, one of the little girls stood up and she said, "We don't like you and we don't need you. We know everything we need to know about TV." And every kid in my class got up and left. Every
mm,
kid. And I was standing in front of an empty classroom crying. I don't cry a lot, but I was crying then because I thought, I don't know what to do. Behaving like we would in a newsroom.
yeah,
That's what they hired me to do. And a little tiny, like 30-year teacher came in and patted me on the shoulder and went, "It'll be okay. It'll be fine." But another teacher took me aside and she said, "Have you ever considered being nicer?" I said, "What are you talking about? Nice? There's no nice in a newsroom. Nice? You do your job or you get fired." And she said, "They're kids." And so I had to learn to be nicer. And then I became a better teacher. So no,
mhm,
I'm telling you, I've had some interesting and difficult jobs.
yeah,
Teaching's the
yeah,
hardest. Teaching is the hardest one I've ever had.
and
Because
so
I'll tell you why. I can make me do anything. If I tell myself I'm going to have this done in 2 days, I'm going to have it done sooner than that. But as a teacher, I have to tell other people what to do. And that's hard. They don't always
yeah,
do it.
and like you're seeing a lot now, teachers wanting better pay, teachers thinking they're not getting treated the way they should. What's one way we could sort of fix that or better that situation, make teachers feel like feel like they are seen more by their schools?
Here's a line I never want to hear repeated. Those who can't do, teach. That line makes me sick because I will say to anybody who says that line, you come in and you handle 5 classes of kids over the course of a day. See how you do every day. It's friggin' exhausting. And I really wish that people understood how much work teachers actually do. It's endless. As soon as you're done with it's almost like TV. As soon as you're done with one show, there's another show coming up. It's the same way. I'm done. Oh, I got through today's classes. Whoa, and I got to be ready for tomorrow's. It's a very difficult job, and all these people that are, acting like we're, you know, teaching kids things they don't want us to teach. It's all made up. Okay, I taught history for a while, for example. I'm a history buff. And I taught history. All this stuff they're saying about critical race theory, all that doesn't exist. It does not exist. I'm appalled at the way people are treating teachers because guess what? If they don't stop it, I think what are we short? 300,000 teachers across the country. So
I'm not sure
if
what
they
the exact number is, yeah, but
we have hundreds of open classrooms here when I was teaching, every day there were subs who didn't show teachers who weren't there, subs didn't show up. You have to cover other people's classes. It shouldn't be that way. There shouldn't be 50 kids in a class. Yeah, 30, 35. There shouldn't even be that many. I just feel that teachers, all they want is to be respected for the job they do. And, during the pandemic, people understood that if the teachers weren't in school, they're screwed because they can't go to work because their kids are at home. And
yeah,
and I think I'm kind of tired of parents acting like school is just free daycare. You know, teachers need to be respected for the work they do. And I didn't appreciate it before I became a teacher either. But yeah, um, people need to respect what we do.
yeah, and on top of just teachers, the a whole education system itself right now is, under a lot of scrutiny, and a lot of people are coming about out saying that they want it to change. What sort of changes do you see for it? Do you want to be put in place for the education system?
I fully believe that now I was a high school teacher and I taught in college briefly.
Yeah,
I was a high school teacher and we got Arizona, we have a terrible system. We get so many kids who don't read at grade level, can't do math at grade level. And I was a reading specialist for about 4 years. And I had kids in ninth grade who read at the first grade level. So my answer to your question is we need to go back and fix elementary school because a second grade teacher who teaches every subject can't teach all those subjects properly. They just don't have the time, nor do they necessarily have the skills. Okay. If you made me a second grade teacher, I could not teach math. I can't teach math. I'm terrible at math. I wouldn't pretend to teach it. But a second grade teacher has to do that. I think what you do is you take elementary school, you rework it so that there's kind of a homeroom teacher, and then you have specialists come in. Oh, the math teacher's coming in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The history teacher, different teachers are going to
Yeah.
come in to teach different things. You hold them accountable, and if a kid fails, you hold them back. I know nobody wants to do that, but they keep just sending kids on. So the problem I had in high school was that I would get kids and they would not understand that if they failed something, they couldn't move on. There were kids that I would explain very clearly, if you fail math, algebra, you're not going to graduate. And they didn't get that because their whole lives they've been pushed forward, even if they failed all their subjects. So we need to
Hmm.
rethink that. We also need to get rid of teacher colleges. Not popular with that's big money in that. But to me, if you're going to be a teacher, you don't major in teaching, you major in the subject you want to teach. You major in history or biology or math, whatever it is, you major in that subject and take 12 to 16 credit hours of classroom theory, how to teach, how to control a classroom, and teach the subject you got the most skill in. I think these two things would go a long way towards fixing the education system.
Hmm. And so they sound like great fixes, and they seem like they could do a lot. But just how do we get those in place? Because there are so many schools all over,
Well,
so much restructuring
you
would
have a
have to be done.
well, first of all, you make unified school districts, I always got in fights with other teachers. I said we need to be unified with the elementary schools so that they know exactly what we need the kids to know by the time they get here. And the problem is all the school districts want to hold on to their little loop of power instead of thinking about the kids first. And that's a problem. I want to know that I can go to the elementary school and the middle school and say, okay, we're having a problem here, let's straighten this out, because you're part of our plan. The kids in our this neighborhood, doesn't matter what grade they are, we're all teachers in this trying to take care of the same kids. So I don't know that you'll ever get it done. I really don't.
Hmm.
I'm frustrated with it now, and I'm glad I'm out of it, quite honestly. I taught at ASU last I taught at ASU's the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism last semester. And at the end of the class, I only had 12 kids. They all want to be
Yeah.
sports reporters. And one of the kids wrote me up and he said, next time ASU should hire someone younger to teach sports reporting. And I went, all right, you don't want to take my years of, you know, TV, print,
Yeah. Mm.
sports officiating background. I'm not good enough because I'm old. So yeah, I'm glad I'm out of
You
teaching.
would think it'd be the opposite. You would think they would want someone older who has all this experience, who can tell you
Well,
about the everything, but, you know
here's my theory. I worked with Chris Berman at ESPN, and great guy, nice guy. And Chris is 2 months younger than me. We're the same age. Do you think if Chris Berman walked in there to teach them, they would have made the same complaint?
probably not.
No, probably not.
Yeah. And so,
Uh-oh, there's my
cycling
cat.
and so, going back into, sports, why are sports so important? You see almost everyone that you talk to nowadays either plays a sport, follows a sport, they at least have some knowledge. Why are sports so important in the world today?
Well, I have to be honest with you. I used to believe the way you do that sports were incredibly important to everyone. Excuse me, I'm pushing my cat down. Um, But I was proven wrong by one of my news directors because I said, I don't understand. They cut my time on the air at night. They go, cut 45 seconds. We have another story. I said, quit cutting my time. I want to keep all my stories. And he said, you don't understand. Most people don't care about sports. I said, that's not true. He said, yes, it is. Why do you think sports comes at the end of the broadcast? So we can cut it when more important things come in. People are much more interested in the weather. And he's right. But that's hard for those of us who love sports to understand that.
Yeah.
Now, you are correct. There are a lot more people who are into working out and playing. Still a vast minority of people, though. Um, I think sports some recently have been getting a lot of bad press, both at the professional and amateur levels because of the
Yeah.
behavior. So I don't know. I don't even know if sports are going to survive because, quite honestly, if we don't straighten out the officiating problem, which has changed dramatically, it used to be I'd go out and do a ball game. Maybe I made a bad call. Maybe people screamed at me or spit at me, or I needed a police escort to my car. All those things have happened to me. Um, but now it ends up on the internet, and people will slam an official and post the videos and pile on. And quite honestly, people don't want to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
So I think sports are in trouble,
And
big
yeah,
trouble.
and one sorry to cut you off, but one of my favorite things was that, the same kind of situation that you're mentioning, an official made a bad call.
You
They
froze
started
on me.
Are you there?
Yeah, you froze. I don't know where you went.
Yeah. But, a similar situation, an official made a bad call, started getting scrutiny on social media, and I was listening to a podcast about the situation, and the person on the podcast said, "Now, how many of those people giving scrutiny do you think had heard of this official before this call, before this game?" And it was, probably none of them. Maybe like one or two people, but officials really aren't as known. They're just kinda like, when you look at sports
Or
players,
wallpaper.
your favorite players, you say, "Oh, we'll go to basketball, you say, "There's LeBron, there's Giannis." And then when there are officials, you just see the uniform, you just see that there's an official there, a ref, you don't really put a name to it. And
No,
so
unless they make a terrible call. And then
yeah.
suddenly it's like Angel Hernandez, in baseball. Everybody
Mhm.
rips him to shreds. And he's getting older and maybe he should retire. But the bottom line is they only know him because they only point out his bad calls. And I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily defending Angel here, but the bottom line is no one ever says, "Hey, great call," unless it benefited them. So no one ever says nice things. Now, I grew up in a world understanding that people weren't going to like me because I was an official. I understand that. But younger people, millennials and younger, they're not willing to put up with the crap. I understood. I took crap from being on TV. People would write me up in the newspaper and say I was a stupid woman. I was used to that. I was used to being taking grief on the football field or in the courts. But quite honestly, young people today aren't willing to take that kind of abuse. They just haven't been, they were raised in a world where everybody got a trophy.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult today. Most young officials quit within 2 years, and people my age are retiring. So where are you going to get officials from? Here in Arizona, suddenly we don't have enough crews to work Friday night football. So we've got varsity games on Thursday night because they just can't get crews. So this is going to continue getting worse. I think there should be a law that says if you play a sport or you have a child who plays a sport, you need to go out and officiate something. Go out to that little league game. Okay, we've got 15-year-olds umpiring baseball in like little league, and they're getting screamed at and chased to their cars. They're 15 years old.
Yeah.
I don't understand what's wrong with people because the only time they care about us is when we don't show up. And if we don't show up or not enough of us show up, you're not having a game. Bye
Yeah.
bye. And I think this is the biggest problem they face in sports because let's face it, if you don't have good officials at the amateur level, where are you going to get your pro guys? We all, we
Yeah.
officiating's like minor league baseball. You
It's
start out at the lowest level and then work your way up. And if we don't have if people are quitting in Pop Warner and Little League, you're not going to have any officials.
yeah.
So what happens to our sports world then?
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by W Energy. W Energy is an energy drink you mix at home from a tub. It helps you focus, it helps you concentrate, it helps you win. W is a lot like these other energy drink mix companies you see, but it's better. They have better flavors, they have better taste, they have better products. you can get Dragonade, you can get Galaxy Grenade, you can get Dub Sludge, and so many more great flavors like Beach and Peach. Once you have the powder to make one of these flavors, you can also get one of W's own shaker cups to make your drinks at home. If energy drinks aren't your thing, no worries. You can get products like stickers and clothing that look awesome. If you just want to try out W, you can go ahead and get one of their starter packs. It comes with a shaker cup and 3 flavors. On top of that, any products you get on any order from W, you can save 10% by using my discount code Heroek. That's just my name, Heroek, in all caps. One more time, that's code Heroek at w.gg for 10% off any order. Go focus, go concentrate, go in, be better. W. Yeah, and it either one, it gets less clean, there are more fouls, less disciplined players who don't really know the rules, or that's if there's still a sports world after that. What are sports without the rules, without the officials there to call anything?
Right. It's just recess. Without the ref, it's only recess, right? And here's the problem. Kids, the players used to be pretty good. But now players watch the way their parents act and the people in the stands act. And they then look at me and say bad things to me and are shocked when I throw them out. I'm like,
Mhm.
just because they act that way over there doesn't mean you can do this on the field. But this is what people are raising. When kids see mom and dad screaming, yelling at a ref and chasing them to their cars, the kid is going to behave the same way. So
Yeah,
it's negating all the good things about sports. And that worries me.
yeah, and you even see that up to the professional level. You see, clips of pro players yelling, like yelling at refs, arguing with refs after calls, and that also influences, kids at the high school, middle school level, and that
Exactly. You're
they want to
absolutely
start
right.
arguing with refs.
And the sad thing is, it used to be it's written in all the rule books. If you argue a call, we're going to eject you. You don't argue calls because we don't have time. The games are too long. That's the other problem with sports. All games are too friggin' long. Um, except basketball, 2 hours and 15 minutes average. I think. What's football now? 3:35 or something
Yeah,
crazy. And I think and then people go, oh, they shouldn't have thrown him out. Why not? You don't argue a call. You look at me and you say
yeah,
that wasn't a strike. Goodbye. You can't argue balls and strikes. Now I'm not that much of a hard. I wasn't that much of a hard
yeah,
ass, but I could have been. And maybe we should be harder. Maybe we've let things get too lax on the field. I've worked with guys who would never throw out a head coach ever, no matter how crappy they were. I'm like, you can't do that. If they're being crappy, we toss them.
yeah.
So officials are becoming less and less in charge, I think, which is only adding to the problem. Because you know why? They don't want to take the grief. They don't want to end up on the internet. So
And having experience as an official, do you think there are officials that, when they're if they make a call and start, getting arguments with them, start having people yelling at them, do you think there's any pressure to sort of, quickly reverse the call or sort of
no,
change your
no,
mind?
absolutely not. Now that
Okay.
doesn't mean calls aren't reversed. They are. Okay. Often we throw flags on a football field that the way it's engineered is if we discuss it, we can pick it up. So we can pick up things and say that's not a
Yeah.
penalty. But I think you're intimating that we give a call back because we made a bad call over here.
Well, I was just sort of asking if, you've seen it happen. I wasn't saying that it's common by any means or anything like
No,
that.
and officials have to, and we understand. The logic is sometimes we make a mistake. Okay, so does the pitcher. Sometimes the ball gets away. Sometimes the quarterback fumbles the ball. Okay, sometimes the coach makes a bad, puts in a bad play.
Yeah.
Now, no one's screaming at them. They're screaming at us. Okay, sometimes I miss something. Sometimes I blink. Sometimes out here in Arizona, it's 115 degrees and I'm calling a ball game. It's miserable. I'm doing my best. Okay, so we do make mistakes, but I don't know any official that turns around and gives a call back. Okay, because if you start doing that, now you got two bad calls. So,
Yeah.
and the other problem is people don't seem to understand that there's rules, and then there is the spirit and intent of the rules. Meaning, okay, is that holding? There's holding on every single play in a football game, but you can't call them all, or we'd be there for 3 days. So the spirit and intent of the rule is that Did it affect the play, or was it a personal foul? Okay.
Yeah.
Did he pull him out of the way so the runner could get through? Clearly hold him. Did he hold him and slam him on the ground and make a personal foul? Okay. But if it's a hold and the ball's on the other side of the field, we're not calling that. It's
Yeah.
nothing. It's dancing. So this is what people don't understand. There are rules, and then there is the spirit and intent of the rules to keep things fair and equitable for everybody. So I
Yeah.
think people just don't understand what we do. I think it's very ironic that they now have officials in the booth. That cracks me up. When I was at ESPN in early 90s, I told them that. I said, this would be great. Hire some officials. They said, no one wants to hear referees talk. I said, yeah, but they know the game better than anybody. And they laughed at me. And now they're everywhere.
Yeah. And so now the world's getting a lot more, digital, especially after this pandemic. And a lot of people have found places online where they can just give their opinions, give their thoughts on anything, but especially sports. What does that do for sports press, sports news, and, written journalism?
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's the problem. As an official, umpire, baseball, football, whatever, um, I see the play once. I might not be in the best spot to see it. Someone might have knocked me down. Um, I get one shot. Yet all the people at home and the reporters, they get to run it back and forth and see it from 9 different camera angles. And a lot of times they still can't decide. That's what
Yeah.
makes me laugh. It's like, okay, you guys looked at 9 camera angles 79 times and you're still not sure, but you're going to yell at me over it. So I think they have to understand that we have one shot at this. We don't always get it right, but remarkably, officials tend to get the vast majority of the calls right in the 90 percentiles.
Yeah.
Percentile. There we go. So I think a little understanding might be better. And also a big thing to me. I know you didn't ask this, but I'm going to say it. I am very tired of all these parents who think their kid's going to be an NFL quarterback and because they can play Pop Warner. I am so over that because first of all, when they do that and they go, "Oh, my kid's just going to play football. They're not going to be in track and they're not going to play basketball. They're just going to play football because they're going to be a star." Like, no, they're not. Really, they're not. A handful of kids might be, but not your kid. So so stop doing this because you're going to make the kid hate sports. You're going to burn them out. Well, I love sports that I do. I really think there are a lot of other options out there for kids. And if you play football, maybe the next semester you should be in the orchestra. Maybe you should try out for a play. Maybe you should be an academic decathlon. Maybe you should be on the chess club. I want to see kids do lots of different things because that's what high school is for. It's where we learn what we're good at and what we might want to pursue as a career. And for almost every kid that plays youth sports, it's never going to be being an athlete. They could be a sports reporter. They could be an attorney, a sports attorney. They could be a physical therapist. They could be a lot of things involved in the sports world. But
Yeah.
this pushing kids and making them think, getting them trainers when they're 6, or they're sending them on their travel leagues, all around. They wonder why these kids burn out. Leave them
Yeah.
alone. Sometimes I think parents shouldn't even be allowed at games because the coach is the new um, role model. That's why you send your kid to play on a team or to be in a play. More adult role models for you. This is what we're trying to teach you. So this is what I hope that parents will just relax and cheer when whatever happens and pat the kid on the back and get him an ice cream cone when it's over and then go take him to piano lessons. I mean,
Yeah.
I, I hope we get better about this.
Yeah. And, speaking of parents, you yourself are a foster parent.
Yes.
What's that experience like for you? What are some of the upsides, downsides of that? Just give us a look at
Um,
that whole experience.
Yeah, that's a weird story because when I was married, I tried to have children. I couldn't have any. And so I gave it up. And then when I was 55, I always at the end of the school year, I put my phone number on the board. And because my kids all lived in very bad, they were living in poverty, gangs, drugs. It
Yeah.
was bad. And so I put my phone number on the board and I said, if you get in trouble and you don't know what to do or who to call me and I will do what I can to help you. And so this summer, one little kid, he was like little 14-year-old, he ended up in foster care, and he called me and said he was hungry. I said, "What do you mean you're hungry?" He said, "Well, they lock up the food, and then at school, I'm at a new school because they took him out of mine, and he said they won't give me lunch, so I'm hungry." And I was horrified. I said, "How in this country can we not feed a child?" And I'm stomping up and down my hallway yelling. And one of the other teachers came out and she goes, "Well, if it bothers you so much, why don't you call foster care and tell him he can live with you?" And I went, "Don't be ridiculous." And the more I thought about it, the more I went, I have extra bedrooms in my house. And I picked up the phone and I called a football official I know who happened to be a judge, and I explained the situation. 2 weeks later, a 14, 15-year-old kid was dropped at my doorstep, and it was hard. It was
Mhm.
hard. I mean, people, kids in foster care have gone through a lot of crap. My kids have gone through horrible situations. I got them all as teenagers. They were my students. They all were my students at some point. So, and they were two of them were legal foster kids. One was homeless, and one just kind of showed up. But it's hard. It's very hard, and I very fulfilling. My kids are all in their 20s now, and they still call me mom, and I consider them my family, and they always will be. And that's the one reason I'm glad I got out of TV, because I never would become a teacher and I never would have become a mom.
Yeah.
But it is difficult because you can't. A lot of people say, "Oh, you can fix any problem with a child with love." That's not enough. They need medical care. Some of them need psychiatric care. Um, I'm very proud that all the kids went to college. They didn't all graduate from college because that's almost unheard of in the foster care world. 1 in 3%, less than 3% of kids in foster care ever graduate from college. And my youngest son graduated from ASU this past May, and that's what we put on his cake. One of the 3%, because it's unheard of. And on top of that, he's autistic. So everybody said he'll never graduate from high school, but he's great. He graduated from high
Yeah.
school, he graduated from college, he works for the VA, he wants to become a dietitian, get his master's degree. Like, you should never write kids off. You'd be surprised what they can
Yeah.
do.
And
But
I
now,
think that's amazing for him, and I'm sure you yourself sort of took some pride in that, felt accomplished for that, you know.
yep,
What
I'm
what
proud
is
of all of
it
them.
what does it feel like to sort of have these kids in bad situations show up and you help them to, great situations like that?
It's funny. People always say, "Why did you do this?" And I said, I couldn't say no. I mean, I'm no saint. I just saw kids in need every day. And, it just, I had bedrooms empty. I would look in my house and go, "All right, I'm living this house. And their bedrooms are empty. What I could put a child there." And it's nothing I ever considered before that day. Uh,
Mhm.
but I'm very glad I did it. It kind of thrills me when they text me and say, "Love you, mom." I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
So, yeah, and, they're my family, and I'll tell you, my mother's 97, and she didn't understand any of this stuff at first, and she would say, "We're having a family dinner," and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna bring 2 of the boys." She goes, "They're not our family." I said, "They're my family. They're my family, mom. Time to learn that." Now she's great about it, but at first she didn't get it at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great kids, but not easy. But you know what? It's not easy raising any kids probably.
Yeah.
So, you just do it.
Yeah. And so, you know, sort of towards the end, to wrap it up, I wanted to ask you some hypothetical questions, some, magical opportunity questions. If, back to your days in sports media, if you sort of got the opportunity to interview and write about any athlete in the world, who would you have wanted to talk to?
Wow. You know, I, I interviewed a lot of people over the years and a lot of famous people, but it's funny, it's the ones that went out of their way. I don't know that I missed anybody. I'll think of that after we finished here. I'll go, "Oh yeah, I should have said this person." But uh I don't know. I just know that there's some people that I interviewed. Do you remember Manute Bol?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was the tallest man to ever play in the NBA.
Yeah.
Um, to make a long story short, Many of my colleagues were nice to me, but not all of them were. And we were all covering the Suns were playing Golden State in the NBA playoffs, and I was supposed to do a story in Manute Bol for the evening news. And it was the evening before, and one of my colleagues, I said, "Oh, when's the press conference tomorrow morning with Golden State?" And they said, "Oh, 10 o'clock." I said, "Great." So my cameraman and I got there at 10 o'clock, and the press conference is over. And the guy that did this to me, he's sitting courtside with his hands like this. He goes, "Oh, are we a little late for the press conference?" And I thought my cameraman was going to hit him. I'm like, "No." So I'm screwed because it's over. And I went to the media coordinator, who happened to be a woman, and I said, "I desperately need to see Manute Bol." And she said, "I'm sorry, but their day is done. You know, the press conference was the end of the day. They're going home, and I'm screwed. I got to fill time on the news, and I don't have an interview." She said, "But let me go talk to him." And I waited 45 minutes, and damn if he didn't come out. And he was charming. And I've never been so grateful to an athlete. And he was the nicest man and stood there and took all my questions. He didn't have to be there. And he's deceased now. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, yeah,
And I will always be grateful to him for saying, "No, no, I'll take my time out." I don't know this woman, never met her in my life, but he did that. And there were good guys like that. There were some who wouldn't even talk to me. So, it's both sides. But I can't think of a specific person that I wanted to interview. I interviewed lots
yeah.
of
Well,
people.
no, that's fun. That story you gave
Got
me
to
is just
dance with
amazing in
Magic
and of
Johnson
itself.
coming out of a locker room. I don't know. So I don't know that I missed a lot. I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I had a pretty solid career.
And the other one, is just in your time, maybe it was the officiating, your time, right? And just any moment in your career. Was there any sports
Yes.
moment that you witnessed that like is your favorite or just really stuck with you?
There is one, and it was from officiating. I was asked to officiate, to umpire a game between the San Francisco Giants and the Phoenix Firebirds, their AAA affiliate here in Arizona before we got the Diamondbacks. And I had the plate. It was televised. Big deal, that I got to do that because,
Yeah.
I wasn't one of the most accepted umpires. And so you know about the strike zone?
Yeah.
What is the strike zone? What's it look like?
Shoulders to knees. Is that correct?
Armpits to the top of the knees, right? But does any umpire call that?
Not
No, they
not
call
very accurately.
well, the problem is that the umpires shrunk it over the years because they didn't want people yelling. And then they determined, it used to be you're standing at the plate and it's from your armpits to your knees, but that's the way it's written in the book. But nobody calls it that way. So we have these ridiculously long games. So anyway, I always was fighting about what the real strike zone was. So Dusty Baker comes out. He was managing he was managing San Francisco, and he comes up and he hands me the lineup card and he goes, "I just want you to know we have a plane to catch." I went, "Oh, I know what he's asking me to do here. Make everybody swing the bat." So I'm behind the plate. First guy comes up and I called a strike high. It was high, but I went strike, right. And and the batter turned around and stared at me. It was an exhibition. Come on. It wasn't like it was.
Yeah, yeah.
So I got that game done in under 2 hours. And the other umpires are staring at me. And Dusty Baker came out and he's standing kind of on the lip of the dugout. The sun's setting in Arizona. The sky's beautiful.
Yeah.
He looked at me and smiled and nodded, and I waved goodbye. And that, I don't know why, I remember that so specifically, but it was really fun. I enjoyed
Yeah,
that. There are
yeah.
lots of I had some good times, but that was a moment that just stuck with me. That I did Dusty a favor and he was grateful. And I
Yeah,
got
well,
to
that
call a strike zone the way I wanted to.
yeah, yeah. Well, the way you wanted to and arguably the right way to call it, and
Yes.
so,
Yes, this
you know,
tiny little strike zone is why baseball takes so damn long.
and then that was a great story and a great way to leave it off, so thank you so much for coming on, anything you still have going on, if you have a website or socials or
Oh,
anything,
I do.
let
I
people
do.
know where to find you, and I'll also leave a link to some of that down below.
Okay, so my website is AnneMontgomeryWriter.com, and that's Anne with an E. And everything else, all my books are listed there. And I will mention this: I have 5 novels published at this point. Not a single one of them has anything to do with sports. You go, "Why don't you write about sports?" I'm like, 60 years of that was enough.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, AnneMontgomeryWriter.com, and all my other links are there.
Yeah, well, thank you again so much for coming on. It's been a great time, and I'll make sure, like I said, to leave a link to some of those things down below.
All righty. Thank you. It was very nice meeting you. I enjoyed it.